Hey everyone. Sorry, I feel like it's been a while since my last update. So finally, everything is kind of settled down for the week, and we need to go ahead and start talking about our third and final kind of piece of literature for the class. So we've done short fiction, we've done poetry, and now we're moving on to the third section, which is drama. And to kind of make this a little bit more streamlined, we're all going to be doing the same play, right? So naturally, when we talk about drama, what we mean are plays, right? And who better to do that with than the most famous dramatist, I guess would be the word. Anyway, just one of the most famous writers in all of English language. Of course, I'm talking about Shakespeare. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at Shakespeare's play Othello, right? Now, the first thing we have to understand is that when we're talking about a play, we're talking about something that is supposed to be seen, right? We're talking about something that's supposed to be acted out with actors, and as an audience, we are watching it, right? So that's one thing that kind of makes doing a play in a class like this a little bit more difficult, is that we're having to read it instead of watch it, right? But the thing about plays is that the dialogue that the characters are speaking is poetic, right? It is literary, it is packed with meaning. And as we are looking over Shakespeare, we're not going to be reading this play as in like breaking down line by line the significance of all the dialogue. We will stop and talk about some of that here and there. But the main thing I need you to get out of this and understand from it is what is being said, what is happening, and why it matters, right? So, kind of, if you're watching this update, kind of follow along and maybe take some notes as I'm talking about some of this stuff. Okay. This one probably will be a little bit longer, so just kind of hang in there, right? So again, the best way that I know to do this is if you can stream the 1995 Lawrence Fishburne film version of Othello. As I mentioned in my previous update, I don't think there's any legal way to watch it online for free. But if you find it on a streaming service, it's like, a couple of dollars, $2 or $3 to rent it. And of course, I can't like make you do anything that is going to cost you money, but I can highly encourage you to stream, maybe rent that 1995 version of Othello and stream it because it's really good and it's very accurate to the play. Of course, they have to cut some stuff here and there, or else it'd be way too long. But they get all of the major scenes and all of the important dialogue very faithfully adapted and recreated. So if you have a few dollars to spare and don't care to spend it, I encourage you to watch the 1995 film version of Othello. When I teach this person in class, we watch that movie. Okay. So let's go ahead and get some introduction stuff out of the way. All right. So the first thing that you need to understand is other than, almost basically Shakespeare would have two types of plays that he would write. He would write comedies, stuff like Midsummer Night's Dream, Much to Do About Nothing, all that kind of stuff. Those are comedies, right? On the flip side, he wrote tragedies. Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Othello, right? So Othello is a tragedy. That means, spoiler alert, almost everyone's going to die at the end. Sorry, if you really wanted to hang on for the ending. Tragedies are plays where most of the cast, by the end of the play, they're dead, right? So we're reading a tragedy, right? So that's the first thing, right? In the title, it says The Tragedy of Othello, the Moor of Venice. Okay. Now, the next very important thing that you need to understand is that what is being referred to here, Othello is referred to as a Moor. Now, unfortunately, this is more or less a racial term, um, but it's not necessarily a very ugly racial term, but it is still referring to the race of the character of Othello. Okay, so essentially, a Moor was what white Europeans used to call anyone who was not a white European. Okay, so obviously we're in Venice, which that is in Italy, right? So I'm pretty sure, right? Venice is in Italy, pretty sure. So anyway, we have Italians, right? And so all of the Italian members, cast members in the play, people like Iago, Amelia, Rodrigo, Senator Brab, are white Europeans. It's important to note that Othello, they refer to him as a Moor, and I don't think we ever explicitly get where Othello is from. But what matters is he is not white. He is not a white European, and the rest of the cast or characters in the play are, right? So think about, they're Italian. They're essentially, to simplify it, they are white Europeans, and Othello he's like from somewhere like Turkey or something like that, but he has a darker tone of skin, right? In various adaptations, you can see obviously Lawrence Fishburne is African American. He portrays him in the film version, right? But Othello is not white. The rest of the characters are. Okay, long story short, that is important for several reasons, right? So we have a tragedy. We have our main character Othello. We know our setting is in Venice, and we know Othello is a Moor, right? So again, that term means he is not white. So that is kind of our setup here, right? So I want you, if you're kind of taking notes as you're watching this, some key things to keep in mind as we are getting into the play. And if you pull up any study guide of Othello, they'll say these same things, right? This is a play about, first and foremost, it's a play about the destructive power of jealousy, okay? So you have Othello, who is our central character here, who, of course, since this is a tragedy, he has his own tragic characteristics. But so you have on one side Othello, who's kind of like our tragic hero, and then on the other side you have Iago, right? So Iago is kind of like our central villain of the play, and his flaw is his jealousy, right? So other characters are jealous in different ways, but you have um, the two central people we need to focus on throughout the course of the play are Othello and Iago, right? Kind of like our tragic hero and our tragic villain, okay? So the other characters we have, and of course, if you have the book here, right, this it's set all up here at the top where it says persons of the play. So Othello the Moor, uh, Brabenzano, however you say it, I just call him Senator Brab. He is the father of Desdemona, who is the love interest of Othello. Here, literally, it just says Iago, a villain, and then you have Iago's wife, Amelia, and then you have Rodrigo, who is kind of like Iago's sidekick. Okay. The other kind of very important character we need to talk about before we get started is Michael Cassio. Okay. So Michael Cassio ends up kind of being the pawn that Iago uses in order to enact his scheme against Othello. Okay, so we'll talk more about Michael Cassio as he becomes a bigger part of the play. But what I want us to do is I kind of just want us to get a feel for some of this kind of stuff and understand what's happening here. Okay. So, in order to make this video as kind of concise as possible and not talk for like, an hour and a half about just the first part of the play, let's go ahead and start. So, Act 1, Scene 1. And you'll notice I'm going to kind of skip around a little bit. So, I'll try as best as possible to kind of tell you where I'm at. But the point I'm getting across here is we don't have to read all of this word for word in order to understand what's going on here, okay? So the play opens at night at a street in Venice, right? So when you think of Venice, that is, your city in Italy where they kind of have the winding waterways that go through the streets. and you have the boats that are called gondolas that, people will, you'll have the guy paddling and you're kind of using those boats to navigate the waters. So that's where we're at. We're in Venice, right? So the play opens with Rodrigo and Iago. So Rodrigo, even though he's kind of like a minor character, he gets the first lines of the play. So here's the way I want you to think about Iago and Rodrigo. If you remember the old cartoon Pinky and the Brain, Iago is the brain and Rodrigo's Pinky. Okay. So basically, poor Rodrigo is not very smart. Iago is very smart. So I don't know how they're friends, but really the friendship mainly consists of Iago taking advantage of Rodrigo and putting Rodrigo in very unfortunate situations to try to further his own schemes, right? So we have these two characters, Rodrigo and Iago, opening the play. And again, I want you to kind of think of them as Pinky and the Brain. Okay. Now, another important detail before we get started is that Rodrigo is in love with Desdemona. Okay. However, Desdemona does not even really recognize Rodrigo's existence, and she is instead in love with Othello. So remember, Desdemona is the daughter of the senator Brad, right? So that's important, right? So you kind of have all these dynamics where Othello and Desdemona are an interracial couple, and that creates problems for obvious reasons for certain characters. And then on top of that, Rodrigo is in love with Desdemona, but it's unrequited. But it's an important thing to know because kind of a lot of what Rodrigo does is to try to get to Desdemona. And Iago knows this, and Iago uses that to his advantage. So also think of Iago as kind of like a puppet master who is trying, or like a chess player who is trying to navigate all these pieces in order for him to kind of get his goal, right? He's very manipulative. That is Iago. Kind of his character trait is the way he manipulates other characters in order to get them to do what he wants. Okay, so let's see a good place to start. So let's skip the first set of lines and kind of talk about um, starting on page 1456, where it says line 15. So let me give you some background to this information, okay? So Othello is a very kind of like high ranking soldier in the Venetian army, okay? So even though he is kind of like an outsider, he is still, I think he's like a general or something like that. He's almost like the top ranking soldier in the army in Venice, okay? Because he is a great warrior, right? Othello is a great warrior, and he goes on later to give a speech where he says, you know me by my actions, not by my words. He says, I have earned your respect through my strength, essentially, not through my eloquence with words. So we need to know that about Othello. He is kind of like I think he is the highest ranking member of the Venetian army, but he has earned it through his actions on the battlefield. Okay, so the play opens by Iago talking to Rodrigo. So Iago is kind of like Othello's right hand man. Okay, however, there are problems here because uh, due to Iago being kind of like this trusted, he's called an ensign, I believe, is what they call him. But think of him kind of like Othello's, essentially like his right hand, um, and one of his most trusted confidants, right? So the play opens with this problem, and we can see here that on line 15, um, we have this quote, which this is Iago talking, and line 15 says, I have already chose my officer. And who was he? Forsooth, a great arithmetician, one Michael Cassio of Florentine. Okay? So the reason I'm skipping to this line and starting here is because this is important. This is what creates the central conflict in this play. Okay? So um, Othello has the responsibility of electing a lieutenant. Okay, Iago, being Othello's right hand man, is assuming that Othello is going to pick him to be the lieutenant. This is not what actually happens. Instead of picking Iago um, to be the lieutenant under or kind of like beside Othello, Othello picks Michael Cassio. Okay. So that is why within this first kind of opening speech, this opening scene, you have Iago talking about this. Okay. He says, I've already chose my officer. And what was he? Forsooth, a great arithmetician. He says here on the side note, hence a foreigner, that he is from Florentine, not Venice, but one Michael Cassio. And he says, a fellow almost damned and a fair wife that never set a squadron in the field, nor the division of a battle knows, more than a spinster, unless the bookish Theric within the tongued counsels can propose, as masterly as he. Mere prattle without practice is all his soldiership. Okay? So, in all of those words, Iago is basically talking about how unqualified Michael Cassio is for this position, right? He says all of these things. He says he's not even from Venice. He's from Florence. He's a Florentine. So he's not even from Venice, but he's going to be the lieutenant that Othello is making for the Venetian army. He says that he has never set a squadron in the field. He's saying he has no experience with setting soldiers in the field. And he says, nor the division of a battle he knows. So he's saying he doesn't know how to order troops in battle. And he says more a spinster, which you see here, spinster means a housewife, unless the bookish theoric, which means learning, wherein good tongued counsels can propose as masterly as he. Basically, he is saying Michael Cassio is all talk and no action. Right here, he says mere prattle without practice is all his soldiership. Okay, so what we have here, going from lines 15 to 25 in Iago's kind of opening speech here, talking about Michael Cassio, is talking about all the reasons that Michael Cassio is unqualified for this lieutenant position that Othello has granted him, right? So keep in mind, reasons why Iago is mad at Othello. Reason number one, he basically got shafted for this lieutenant position, and this person that he considers to be less qualified got chosen for it instead. Okay? So he starts by talking about why Michael Cassio is unqualified for this position that he thinks he should have gotten. And he's telling this to Rodrigo. Okay? So he continues his speech. This is line 25, kind of where we stopped. He says, mere prattle without practice is all his soldiership. But he, sir, had the election and I, of whom his eyes had seen the proof at Rhodes, at Cyprus, and on other grounds, christened and heathened, must be beled and claimed by debtor and creditor. This countercaster, he in good time, must his lieutenant be, and I bless the mark, his moorship ensign. Okay? So again, what is he talking about here? What is he saying? He's saying that Michael Cassio has been selected for this lieutenant position that Iago feels like he should have gotten, and he has to say, he says, bless the mark, which is another way of saying God help us, has to remain the Moorship, who is Othello, the Moor, remain his ensign. So essentially remain his lower ranking compatriot, right? Rodrigo interjects. He says, by heaven, I rather would have been his hangman. What what is Rodrigo saying here? Rodrigo is saying to Iago, kind of like agreeing that he should be angry. He says instead of being the ensign when he could have been the lieutenant, that Iago should be so mad about this that he should actually be Othello's hanged man. Okay? He's saying that Iago should be so upset about this decision that he should be wanting Othello to be hanged because of it. That's the degree of kind of like disrespect that this decision has cast upon Iago. Okay? So going on, Iago responds to this about line 32 or 33. He says, "Why, there's no remedy. 'Tis the curse of service. Preferment goes by letter and affection, not by old gradation. Where each second stood hair to the first, now, sir, be judge yourself, whether I in any just term am affined to love the more." Okay? He says, again, you kind of have this side note here in the book. He says, "Should I be bound," and it says affined means in any just way, "to love the more." He's saying that even though I am Othello, who is the Moor that's being referred to here, even though I am his right hand man, due to this decision that he has made to make Michael Cassio the lieutenant, should he still be bound to love him in any just way now that this decision has been made? Rodrigo says, "I would not follow him then." This is an important section right here. So Iago says, "Oh, sir, content you." He says, "Be content. I follow him to serve my turn upon him." Okay? So right there, these are very important lines, and you'll hear me say this a lot as we're talking about Othello. You're going to hear me say, take note of these lines. So take note of these lines right here. Very important lines coming from Iago. I follow him, referring to Othello. He says, "I follow him to serve my turn upon him." Now, the book tells you, kind of gives us away, what this means. He says, "I follow Othello in order to serve my own interests." Okay? And that's a very kind of key component of understanding understanding Iago, not Rodrigo. Everything Iago does and all the way he manipulates other people is simply to serve his own interests. And he tells us that at the very beginning of the play. He says right here, not even 50 lines into the first scene, that he's following Othello only to serve his own interest, to serve Iago's own interest. Now, more important lines here. He says, "We cannot all be masters, nor all masters can truly be followed. You shall mark many a duteous and knee crooking knave," saying people who serve on their knees, right? "You shall mark many a duteous and knee crooking knave that, doting in his own ubiquitous bondage, wears out his time, much like his master's ass," which, don't laugh, in this context, he's talking about donkey. Ass means a donkey, so the master's donkey. "For naught but provender, and when he's old, cashiered, whip me such honest knaves. Others there are who, trimmed in forms of visages of duty, keep yet their hearts attending on themselves, and throwing but shows of service on their lord, do well thrive by them, and when they have lined their coats, do themselves homage. These fellows have some soul, and such a one I do profess myself. For, sir, it is as sure as you are Rodrigo, were I the Moor, I would not be Iago. In following him, I follow but myself. Heaven, this my judge, not I for love or duty, but seeming so for my peculiar end. For when my outward action doth demonstrate the native act and figure of my heart, and compliments extern, 'tis not long after that I will wear my heart upon my sleeve, for draws to peck at it. This is very important what he says here. I am not what I am. Okay? So again, let's sum this up. So, in so many words, this little speech that Iago just gave basically just told us his plan. So, we know that he feels that he has been slighted by Othello because Othello has elected Michael Cassio, who Iago thinks is completely unfit for the position, to be the lieutenant instead of him, right? So he is kind of telling Rodrigo right now that he is not very happy about that. And in so many words, he has just said, I am going to kind of remain in this position of servitude to Othello, but it's all going to be a ruse. It's going to be an act. He says, I follow him to serve my turn upon him. And again, he says right here at the about line 65 on page 1457, he straight up tells us, the audience and Rodrigo, he says, I am not what I am, right? So this is very important, right? Again, if you have the book, you have all of these side notes here, and you also have these footnotes at the bottom of the page, right? So these will help explain a lot of what's going on here. So the line, I am not what I am, is footnote number 5. And it says, probably I am not in essence what I seem in appearance, or the opposite, though it comes to the same thing. I am not in appearance what I am in essence. Okay? Either way, the language reverses God's "I am what I am" from the Bible, Exodus 3:14, while perhaps indicating Iago's divided self. Right? So very important lines. Okay. Now, like I said, in order to make sure this video isn't an hour and a half or 2 hours long, I'm going to sum up a lot of this. Okay. So essentially, I want to just get to a certain point and then we'll stop and then I'll pick up in the next video. So the point that I want to get to is the scheme that in this opening scene and act, Iago and Rodrigo come up with in order to get the attention of the senator, Senator Brab. Okay. Now remember, this senator, and you'll see his name here is Barbranzano or whatever. I just call him Brab, Brab. He is the father of Desdemona. So Desdemona is Othello's love interest, but she is also the woman that Rodrigo is after, right? So Iago and Rodrigo are hatching a scheme basically to try to get Othello in trouble. Okay. So, long story short, Senator Brab is not too keen on his daughter being with Othello, right? Probably because there's some racism going on there. But it's almost, like he is not very content with knowing his daughter is essentially in an interracial relationship with Othello. Long story short, okay? So, here we see Rodrigo and Iago kind of coming up with a plan, right? So Rodrigo says after the "I am not what I am" from Iago, this is about line 63 or so. Rodrigo says, "What a fool fortune does the thick lips spew if he can carry it thus." So here, Iago responds, call up her father, referring to Desdemona's father, Senator Brab. Okay. Rouse him, take after him, poison his delight, proclaim him in the streets, incest her kinsman, and though he in a fertile climate dwell, plague him with flies. Though that be though that his joy be joy, yet throw such chances of vexation on it as it may lose some color. So essentially, Iago right here is saying, we're going to go wake up Senator Brab and tell him some very bad news. That is their plan that they're doing right here. So Rodrigo says, here is her father's house. I'll call aloud. So remember, they're out on the street. And basically, they're going to yell from the street up to the window of Senator Brab's bedroom, right? So they're literally just going to stand on the street and yell to get his attention from his bedroom window, okay? So he says, here's our father's house, I'll call aloud. Iago says, do like with timorous accent and dire yell, as when by night in negligence the fire is spied in populous cities. So he's saying, I want you to yell so loud that you're going to be like one of those people who look out for fires. And when they see a fire, they have to like yell and tell people there's a fire to alert them of it. That's how loud he wants them to yell. Okay. So they're going to do this. So essentially, Rodrigo just starts yelling, "What ho, Brabanzano! Senor Brab, ho!" Iago joins in. "Awake! What ho! Thieves, thieves! Look to your house, your daughter, and your bags! Thieves, thieves!" They're literally just in the street yelling, trying to get his attention and wake him up. It works. It says enter Brab above. So he comes to like his balcony window and looks down and he says, "What is the reason of this terrible summons? What is the matter here?" Rodrigo responds, "Senor, is all your family within?" Iago adds, this is top of page 1458, "Are your doors locked?" Brab, "Why? Wherefore ask you this?" Iago. Now watch how he's kind of doing some wordplay here. He says, "Sir, you're robbed. For shame, put on your gown. Your heart is burst. You have lost half your soul. Even now, very now," and this is slightly racist, just sorry, this is just the tone of the play. But he says, "An old black ram is tupping your white ewe," saying that Othello is with his daughter, right? That's what he's saying. "Arise, arise, awake the snorting citizens with the bell, or else the devil will make a grandsire of you. Arise, I say." Now, keep in mind, Iago is saying some very, very terrible things right now about Othello. Othello is supposed to be one of his best friends. Othello trusts Iago. However, look at this awful language and what he is trying to do. He is essentially trying to get Othello in trouble by saying, alerting Desdemona's father that Othello is with Desdemona. He's throwing Othello under the bus right now in order to get in trouble. That's what he is doing. Okay. Brab says, "What? Have you lost your wits?" Rodrigo, "Most reverend Senor, do you know my voice?" Brab, "Not I. What are you?" Rodrigo, "My name is Rodrigo." Brab does not like Rodrigo because remember, Rodrigo's after Desdemona. Brab, "The Wurzer, welcome. I have charged thee not to haunt about my doors." He's basically saying, "I've told you to leave me alone. You can't be with Desdemona. I have charged thee not to haunt about my doors. In honest plainness, thou hast heard me say, my daughter is not for thee. And now in madness, being full of supper and distempering draughts," saying he's probably drunk, right? "Upon malicious knavery dost thou come to start my quiet." Rodrigo, "Sir, sir, sir." Rab, "Thou must needs be sure my spirits and my place have in their power to make this bitter to thee." He's saying, "Don't make me, like, use my legal actions on you." Rodrigo says, "Patience, good sir." Brab, "What's this you tell that, what's, sorry, what tells thou me of robbing? This is Venice. My house is not a grange." He's saying, "This is Venice. I'm a senator. People can't just rob me, right?" "Most grave Brab, and simple and pure soul, I come to you." That's Rodrigo. We're going to tell him what he's being robbed of, right? Iago, line 106. "Sir, you are one of those that will not serve God if the devil bid you, because we have come to do you service and you think we are ruffians. You'll have your daughter covered with a Breviary horse. You will have your nephews neigh to you. You will have your cursors and cousins and yonnets for Germans." Again, I won't fully translate all this, but unfortunately, Iago is being very racist once again. He is saying that if your daughter has children with Othello, then they will be, biracial children. Some pretty racist language here that's being used. Um, so he's telling all this to Senator Brad. Also, I want to double back real quick. Um, to lines 188, or sorry, lines 88 and 89. He's saying that the devil will make a grandsire of you. He's saying that if Othello is not stopped, he's calling Othello a devil here. He's saying that the devil will make you into a grandfather, right? He's saying the devil will birth your grandchildren. So some more troubling language. So skipping back down to line 111, after Iago says all this horrible stuff, Brab says, "What profane wretch art thou?" Iago, "I am one, sir, that come to tell you your daughter and the Moor are making the beast with two backs." If you've ever wondered where that phrase comes from, it's Shakespeare. Beast with two backs, it's Shakespeare. Okay. So that's the origin of that phrase. This is actually kind of funny, though. Brab says, "Thou art a villain." Iago, in response, "You are a senator," right? So I do like that, where he's like, that is his response to being called a villain. He's like, well, if I'm a villain, you're a senator, so you're worse than a villain, right? Brab says, "This thou shalt answer. I know thee, Rodrigo." Rodrigo, "Sir, I will answer anything, but I beseech you, if it be your pleasure and most wise consent, partly as I find it, that your fair daughter at this odd, even and dole watch o' the night, transported with no worse nor better guard, but with a knave of a common hire on a gondolier." Again, that's the boats that they take through the waterways. Um, the grass clops of the vivacious Moor, that's Othello, so on and so on. He's basically just saying, where is it? Your daughter, if I had, your daughter, if you have not given her leave, I say again, have made a gross revolt, trying her duty, beauty, wit, and fortunes in an extravagant and wheeling stranger of here and everywhere. Saying Othello is, not from there. He is a stranger. Straight satisfy yourself. If she be in your chamber or your house, let loose on me the justice of the state for deluding you. So let's stop here and then we'll pick up next time, because this video will take a long time to upload. But what I want you to understand, other than just the establishing, the setting, the characters, what I want you to see in this opening scene is how Iago and by proxy Rodrigo are already scheming up ways to get Othello in trouble. Okay. So the play opens by Iago explaining why he has such a problem with Othello. So keep in mind, even though Iago is supposed to be Othello's most trusted person, he's supposed to be Othello's right hand man, he is so slighted by Othello's decision to make Michael Cassio. Oh, you can see Turbo in the background. Hi, Turbo. He is so slighted by Othello's decision to make Michael Cassio the lieutenant over him that he is just starting to find ways that he can plot a revenge of some way in Othello, right? So what we just saw in this opening section is kind of like the first seed of that, right? The first seed of Iago planting this kind of like revenge that he is going to take for what Othello has done. Okay. So the very first thing that he is trying to do here is make Desdemona's father turn against Othello. Okay. So that is what we will see as we keep going with this scene. But what I want you to take away from this part that we just read is that Iago is trying to get Senator Brab, Desdemona's father, to start thinking about how he can turn against Othello. Okay, so as we go forward, we will talk more about the role of Michael Cassio, and then once Othello and Desdemona actually show up in the play, we'll talk about kind of how they defend themselves against the accusations that are being kind of put against them here. But I just wanted to kind of establish the setting, establish the characters, talk about some of their motives, and also just kind of translate some of this for you so you can understand what's being said. Okay. So we're stopping right before I think Othello comes in. Yeah, so we almost finished scene one. So we're stopping kind of in the middle of page 459. Scene two begins towards the bottom of 1460. So we almost made it through scene one. But again, for this video to not be way too long, I'll go ahead and stop there. So please make sure you're just understanding what's happening, because remember, our third and final literary analysis essay will be on Othello. So make sure that you're understanding this and you can come up with some ideas for your final essay, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and stop this video for now. When we come back in the next update, We'll do some more reading. Sorry, most of this video was just kind of establishing what's going on and a little bit of the reading. Now that we got that out of the way, the next videos will be more just straight reading the lines and explaining them and kind of moving forward with the plot. Okay, so I might even do another video tomorrow, depending on how much time I have. Um, so I will just, always alert you when the new videos are available. But just watch these, make sure you're taking notes, and I promise we'll get through this play. All right. So that'll be it for tonight, and I will see you in the next update.